Okay, some people are coming in, so we're going to start anyway. We're going to start the class. Beautiful Parsha, a phenomenal Parsha. We say it every week. Unbelievable portion, the portion of Toldot. We're going to start. Sarah, I know you don't have the book, but you just listen in.
I'll get it next time.
Okay, this class starts off in the, if you have the book, it's on page 70. That's where, it's on page 70. Page 70 is where the portion starts. So here's a book, people.
Did I miss everything?
You missed the whole class, it's over.
Do you read together?
Okay, so good morning, everybody. We start the class on page 70 in your book. Student, if you have a book, it's on page 70. If you don't have a book, we're starting the class. It's Bereshis, the portion of Bereshis, Genesis, chapter 26, verse number 2 and 3. So this is the entry class that ever writes this class. It might be a little, how would you use the right political words? It might be a little bit political, not political in America, but political in Israel, or it might be a hot subject in the land of Israel, what this class is going to be talking about. Because it's something, Israel is important to us, whether we are in Israel, whether we are in America, and Israel has a very important part to our existence, correct? So therefore, it's going to get a little bit that way as connected to the portion. Okay, ready? So we're holding in, the Torah is talking about Isaac. That's this week's Parsha, Yitzchak Avinu. We mentioned last week that one of the differences between Isaac and Abraham was that Abraham was a traveler. He traveled around his country. He traveled around whatever the world was then, and he went around the world. Went to Mitzrayim, etc. Isaac was the opposite. Isaac stayed in the land of Israel, and the Torah tells us that Isaac came a time that there was a famine in the land. There was a famine in the land of Israel. And Isaac decided to go down to Egypt. He decided to leave Israel. There was a famine in the land. So that's where we start. We start off on the verse in Bereshis. And God came to him. And he told him, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land that I tell you. Verse 3, Gur ba'aretz hazois. Live in this land. Ve'ei imach, I will be with you. Va'varachecha, I will bless you. Ki lechol azarecha, because you and your seed, etin es kol ha'aretz Yisrael, I'm giving you all these lands. Ki meis yes hashvu asher shpat la'Avram avicha. So we know this is an important verse to the Jewish people, because if he does go on Abraham, then we have a problem. Abraham had Yishmael also; he had other children, right? So therefore, God says that I promised Abraham, I meant you, Isaac. We have a problem with Isaac too, because he had an Esau. So therefore, God is going to promise the same thing to Jacob in the next week's portion. God's going to reiterate this promise, because nobody should think that I've given it to Yishmael, I've given it to you. Nobody should think I've given it to Esau, I've given it to you. Right? So it's very important, these verses. So Rashi says, on text number 1b, Rashi on that verse, on verse number 2, Rashi says, do not go down to Egypt. I had in mind to go down to Egypt, as his father has gone down to Egypt. His books. But he was told, do not go down there, right? Egypt, you are perfect burnt offering. It's a very interesting thing. God, why shouldn't Isaac go down to Egypt? Why shouldn't he go down to Egypt? There's a famine in the land. There's no food. So he said, you're an oila temima. You are a perfect burnt offering. What does that mean? You were brought up as an offering on the Akedah. You were brought up as an offering on the mountain. And being outside the Holy Land is not fitting for you. Now that's an interesting expression, right? Because it was not yet the Holy Land. That's the question. When does it become the Holy Land? It's Canaan. It's Canaan. It's the land of Canaan. When does it become the Holy Land? We have seemingly a concept, because if it's the Holy Land, how did Abraham leave the Holy Land? So he says even Abraham could have left the Holy Land, and Jacob's also going to leave the Holy Land, right? Jacob goes out to Egypt, and he goes out with his whole family to Egypt. They're stuck in Egypt for 210 years. That they leave the Holy Land. So how do we have this understanding? Right over here is a book. How do we have this understanding to mean that what is the meaning of this? Yeah. So what is the meaning of this statement? Go back to Abraham in text number 7:1. Over there we have the same kind of expression. Vayemehu karas, on that day, page 71, text number 2a. On that day, God formed a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your seed, I've given this land from the river of Egypt until the great river, the Euphrates River. So God has given the land from the Egypt to the south to the Euphrates to the north. Right, we're going pretty far. The Euphrates to the north is going more than the land of Israel is today. Right? There's no Euphrates in the land of Israel. Yeah, it's going into to Iraq. It's going into.
What it is that the most rivers start in Turkey, and if you look at how it goes, it is actually it would appear to be a northern border, but it's in Turkey, and then it goes into Syria, and then goes into.
Yeah. So whatever, it's bigger land, and we have across Jordan. We have, if you go to the land of Israel, how big it is, right? And then when the Jews came to land. They were given oaths to the other side of the Jordan, so the three tribes. So it's we have a bigger land that we have right now. Whatever, that's a separate issue. So this when God gave Abraham the land of Eretz Yisrael, of Canaan. It was many hundreds of years before the Jewish people went into the land of Israel, before they conquered the land. Right? It was. From the time of Isaac, it was 400 years later. Right? We figured out that from the time Isaac is born until the Jewish people went out of Egypt, it's 400 years. So there's 400 years between the promise that God tells Abraham, which is really fascinating. Actually, some say that we know Tchias HaMesim from this promise, because really the truth is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob weren't given the land. Were they given the land? It was not. Were they given the land? What is the meaning of this statement? Right? Because really they were not given the land. Were they given the land? Was it a holy land? So it seems like there's two concepts in the land, as you'll soon see. There's a concept of giving the land, as a piece of property, and that it becomes a holy land. So Abraham and Isaac and Jacob really didn't get the holy land yet, right? They're buried there, but they didn't actually receive it in their lifetime. The concept of the Holy Land, they were promised to their offsprings. So imagine Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob kept the entire Torah because 400 years later, that's what you should learn for them. 400 years later, they were thinking about their great-grandchildren. Are you thinking about your great-great-grandchildren? 400 years from now? 400 years from now. I'm worried what's going to happen 400 years from now.
Yeah, get it.
It's amazing. So that's what these are great people. They weren't thinking about themselves, right? They were thinking about their great-great-grandchildren. Something like 7 generations, right? From Abraham to Moses is 7 generations. But that's the beauty of it. That's a separate issue. But so you look in the Medrash 2b and page 72, God's spoken word is considered like a deed. So it's a good question. What happened? What were they given? They were given a promise. They were given a good statement that you're going to have the land. Your offspring is going to have what. So therefore the Medrash says that God's spoken word is considered like a deed. As the verse states, to your seed I've given this land. It doesn't say I will give the land, but I've given this land. It should have really said to your offspring, 400 years from now, I'll give you the land. But right now it's not yours. No, he says, I've given it now, so they will have it in 400 years. So in essence, Abraham had the land, whatever that means. We'll soon see in a minute. Yeah.
In Hebrew, in all Semitic language, there's really no past, present, and future. There's
Right.
complete and incompleted action. Natapi means it's over. I gave it. There's
Right.
nothing you can do about it.
Correct. That's what does that mean? But they didn't have the land. So why did they have to conquer the land? It was called Eretz Canaan in the Torah. It's called Eretz Canaan. It doesn't say. It's not called Eretz Yisrael. It's called Eretz Canaan. So what is the meaning that it's over? It's over what? What's over?
I've given it to you. End of story. Nothing more to talk.
Is it his?
Hashem's?
I mean, is it Abraham? I'm not worried about Hashem. Hashem's with it. Right now, is it the land? Is it the land belong to Abraham? That's the question. Is it his land?
If Hashem gave it to him,
It's his.
it's his. End of
Okay.
story.
But is it? So what was accomplished by conquering the land? What did the Jewish people accomplish by conquering it? It seems like something different happened when the Jewish people actually conquered the land. Abraham didn't have to give trumas and maestris and all these laws of the land. It was an obligation for him to do that in the mitzvahs. That was given to the Jewish people after they conquered the land. Actually, the Jewish people themselves didn't do the mitzvahs that are connected to the land until after they conquered and divided, which 14 years later, right? So even after they conquered the land and they divided the land, that was 14 years. So for the first 14 years the Jewish people came to land, they still didn't do the mitzvahs of the land of Israel. Shows you that something happened. Even though the land was given to Abraham, something happened after the Jewish people conquered the land. Which is in halacha, that's the general halacha. You learn Gemara that the kibush the conquering the land of Yeshua is the land. The whole question of David HaMelech, he conquered many land. Is it considered part of Eretz Yisrael? It's a whole argument in the Gemara. Because it's not a kibush of Yeshua. Kibush Yeshua is a kibush of Eretz Yisrael. And that created some kind of aspect in the land of Eretz Yisrael. That the David HaMelech conquered many other lands, which he did. In Eretz Yisrael, he made the land bigger. It's a question of Gemara. Is it considered, what is the status, the spiritual status of the land? But where do we see that the land is important even before the Jewish people went into the land? Not only as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who lived in the land, because they ultimately lived in the land. They lived, whatever it's Eretz Canaan, they physically lived there. Right? The Jewish people received the land, was divided the land before they even came to the land. Right? The land was divided. Moshe Rabbeinu divided the land of Israel. Right? He divided the land. He was never in Israel, Moses. He divided the land according to the tribes, which is an amazing thing on its own, that he knew how to divide up the land of Israel. Well, that's how they sent the spies. But he knew to divide the land of Israel, how to divide it. And it's also, if you think about it, Moshe Rabbeinu sends the spies to the land of Israel, telling them where to go. He never was in the land. But self-understood, he was a prophet, so he was in the land. So we find that, as the next text number 3, we find in the story of Bnei Safchad, that the Bnei Safchad wanted a part of the land. They wanted a part of the land of Israel. Right? Why did they want a part of the land? Because of their father. Right? That means the father was dead. That was the whole point. The father was dead. How do you inherit something from somebody that's dead? Then he was never in Israel. Slavchad was never in Israel. Then I was never in Israel. So that shows you that the Jewish people inherited the land before they came to the land. They actually inherited the land. So they didn't have to conquer the land to inherit the land. So not only did God give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob the land, the second he gave Abraham and Jacob, you're right, what you said before, it's a fait accompli. And the land belongs to his offsprings, even though Abraham was in the land. even though these offerings were not in the land, right? Because they were in Egypt for the past 400 years, 200 years. So all the offerings of the Jewish people from Jacob were not in the land. Right? Jacob came down with his 12 sons, 70 people. They left Egypt with 1 million people. Right? They were 210 years left with millions of people. And here, Moses divides the land between these millions of people before you even conquer the land. How are you dividing a land before you conquer a land? 600,000 men. Of all the women, and all the children, millions of people, all men over 20 and above. You have thousands, millions, who knows? I don't know the number. There's always an argument, the number of how many people were there. There's 600,000 men. Then how many women are there? And how many children of men and women are there? You have at least 1.5 million. Right, it's over 1 million people. Has to be over 1 million. Because statistically, there's more women than men. So those days they married more than one wife. So, right, 80% of them didn't leave Egypt. So it's still, you can imagine how many Jews were. That's a separate class. That we'll have to wait for Shemois, okay? So in this situation, you have in the story of Slafa, which is text number 3. So they demand part of the land that belonged to their father. What do you mean? Your father, first of all, your father didn't get into the land yet. Number 2 is your father's dead. How can you inherit something that he didn't inherit yet? Right? He didn't come into the land. We didn't get into Israel yet. So you're coming with a demand that your father didn't own yet. The truth is, some say that was Moses. That's why Moses Rabbeinu asked God the question. Good question. Moshe Rabbeinu himself was in doubt. That's a good question. How do you inherit a land from a person that's dead that never inherited the land?
But Hashem gave it to Avraham Avinu in the beginning. Then whether it belongs to Yitzchak, and then it belongs to Yaakov. It's all because they're all descendants.
I understand, but it's hard to demand a land. But something happened again that when the Jewish people went into the land, so they didn't conquer the land yet. So whatever, it was a question. It was a question by Moshe Rabbeinu. God answered. That came like say Chadavers. Because they had such a love to the land, they're correct. It belongs to them. It belongs to them. They didn't get into the land yet. It belongs to them. They have an inheritance in the land. The father inherited the land, even though now the father is not alive. The father is dead. Let's look at Maimonides' text number 4, which makes the question even deeper a little bit. In Maimonides, in Mishnah Torah, it says, he says, whenever Eretz Yisrael is mentioned, the intent is the land conquered by the kings of Israel or the prophets with the consent of the entire Jewish people. That's conquering the land. This is called the conquest of a community. That's what I mentioned before with the question of David HaMelech. If, however, an individual or family or tribe goes and conquers a place for themselves, even in the land given to Abraham, it is not considered Eretz Yisrael, in the sense that one is obligated to observe all mitzvahs there. So the Rambam says, it's not so pashut. It's not so simple to say, oh, the Eibishter gave the land, the Eibishter gave Abraham this land, it's Eretz Yisrael, go and conquer the land. No, Eretz Yisrael is considered Eretz Yisrael that was conquered by Yeshua for the sake of the Jewish people, or by ultimately David HaMelech, that was conquered for the sake of the Jewish people. All of the lands that Jews were ascended from Egypt took possession of were sanctified in the first consecration of the land. When by contrast, the descendants of the exiles descended from Babylon and took possession of a portion of the land, they consecrated in the second time. This consecration is perpetuated forever, from that time for all times. So now Eretz Yisrael was taken ultimately by Yeshua the first time, and the second time after the first Bavel, the first destruction of the first temple. So whatever the Jews came and proclaimed as the land, taken back as the land, is the land of Eretz Yisrael, is considered a holy land. It's considered Eretz Yisrael. Question is, like for example, the whole argument today. I don't want to bring it up. For example, you have for example, what is it called in the south of Israel? No, the south. Eilat. Is Eilat considered part of Eretz Yisrael? Is Eilat considered part of Eretz Yisrael? The question would be: you have to keep the 1 day Pesach or 2 day Pesach? Well, all the rabbis in Israel say that it's part of Eretz Yisrael, and they keep 1 day Pesach. But it's a question. I'm just saying it's a question. It's a question. There's a question out there because it was conquered by the government in 1967. And then it's a question if they have the right to make Eretz Yisrael a lot. They have the right to establish a lot as part of Eretz Yisrael or not. It's a question. I'm just saying. It's a question out there. There are some rabbis, for surely like big rabbis in America, will say that it's not. It's not. Whatever. It's not original. It's surely not original. It's not original. Not Yeshua conquered Eilat, and not David HaMelech conquered it. So it's not original. But it's a lovely place. It's a beautiful place. I was there. I don't know when it was. It's 48. It's 48. Okay. Okay, whatever. Whenever they took Eilat, it's a good question. I'm not very good in history. Okay, don't challenge me in history. And also, going back to your question last week, he was Melech Gerar, so he wasn't Philistine. Okay.
We have it already in the
right.
What we read today already this morning. It says Avimelech.
Yeah. So he's a place. Right. Okay. Yeah. Correct. I'm telling you, you're right.
Can I please?
Yeah.
On the idea of who the land belongs to.
Yeah.
Look at the first Rashi in the Torah.
Oh, very good. Very good. We're going to get to that. I'm not going to not going to disappoint you. Don't worry. I will not disappoint you. Ready? So therefore the Rebbe, this is Sikha of the Rebbe. The Rebbe says in text number 5, a very interesting thing. It says, 2 things occurred when the land was given to the Jewish people. There's 2 things that happened. A monetary element, meaning the Jewish people ownership of the land. And number 2, a holy element, the sanctification of the land. It's 2 different concepts. There's the monetary concept, the physical land, and there's the spiritual land. Eretz Yisrael as a physical entity, and Eretz Yisrael as a spiritual entity. The first element, Jewish ownership over the land, as achieved by God giving the land to Israel, to Abraham. God says, I am physically giving Eretz Yisrael to you. It's your land. This land is my land. It isn't your land. It is your land. It is physically your land. That's it. That's the way it is. This land is your land. That's a physical transaction. But the second element is a whole different reality. It's the spiritual reality, Eretz Yisrael, Eretz HaKadoshah, the Holy Land. So, but the second element, the land of Israel's sanctity, especially special mitzvahs, that's what we're talking about. The sanctity land is doing the mitzvahs of the land, Shemitah, Truma, Maisis, etc., the Beis HaMikdash, blah, 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 blah. That's a whole different reality. That's a whole different thing. First occurred when the Jewish people entered. That took the Jewish people to conquer the land. So the Eibishter gave the land, but the land didn't become Kodesh until the Jewish people came into the land, which took 400 years. 400 years later, that the Jewish people came into the land of Eretz Yisrael. And it took them, as I said before, 14 years to conquer the land and divide the land of Eretz Yisrael.
Does that differ for Avram Avinu when he did have with Melech Gerar? When he gave whatever like this, if it wasn't Kadosh at that time,
yeah,
and it took, as you said, 400 years
right.
for this, does that therefore mean that what he did was okay, because I think you gave a different explanation before.
That's the problem. Some people say that he didn't do the right thing. That was Avram's mistake. That he had no right to do that.
But
The Abishah gave him the land. Yeah, but the Abishah gave him the land. The Abishah gave him the physical land. Why is he making deals on the physical land? That was Shlomo Melech also his mistake. The Abishah gave him, then he starts making mechiram. He starts making peace packs. He doesn't should. His question was that he made the deals with Avram Avinu made deals with Avimelech for the land, and then he gave so to say split the land. And I'll be here, you'll be there. And I gave you the land. We have a right to split the land. We have a right to make any deals with anybody. There's a whole farshim on that. Why did Avram do that? Did he have the right to do that? I mean, he had the right to do it because it was his land.
No, the Rebbe said very clearly on this.
Right. Now talk about the question is now for sure you don't give anything. Because now not only it's your land, it's Kaddish. It's a holy land. You don't have a right to give it even because it's a holy land. Because it's a double whammy.
Someone says, show me the deed to the land. And you said, well, God gave it to me. It's a little one.
That's a Torah. The deed is a Torah. The deed is a Torah. All most religions believe in the Torah. It's a Torah. The Torah says so. Finished. That's the biggest deed. What can be more of a deed than the Torah that was given thousands of years, that were accepted for thousands of years as a statement? That's what we're going to bring on to Rashi. The biggest answer Rashi says is to say the truth and the Torah. That's it. That's the biggest answer.
Politically, former Israeli ambassador to here, he used that all the time. In fact, he carried the Tanakh with him. And when anybody said to him, this is our deed.
Right.
Now, if you don't want to
So let's continue because people on the internet can't hear this conversation. So okay, no, it's all right. Just to make it shorter. Okay, so let's continue and let's go to text number 6a, and that's why we say, I will give you to your seed and to you and your seed afterward the land of your sojourn, and the entire land of Canaan for an everlasting possession. I will give, and I'll be their God. So here we see the pasuk itself also makes, I'm going to give the land, then I'll be as a God, and then I'll be as a God. So therefore, the Rabbi Yehuda Lowy, the Maral Miprat, says in text number 6 beyond page 75, it is true that the verse states that I will give you and your seed after you, meaning in the future. But that refers to the actual giving, which hadn't yet taken place and would only occur in the future. So you have the concept of so the Abishah did give the land, but it seemed like he didn't give the land. It was something that would happen in the future. So again, that's correct, because something did happen now in the present. Gave him the physical land, but he didn't give him the spiritual land. He would give him the spiritual land in the future. And it will be 400 years later. The question is why? Really, the question is why? Why couldn't God give Abraham the spiritual and the physical and the present? Why did God do that? Why would God do that? That's really, you have to ask that question. Why couldn't God give Abraham the physical and the spiritual at the same time? You've been coming to Chabad. This should be a simple answer to you. We've learned this many different ways. This answer, right? So that's the answer. And the answer is, what did Matan Torah accomplish? Right? Matan Torah accomplished. Even though Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob kept the whole Torah, it says they kept the whole Torah. But so why you need to give me the Torah? So something that says Matan Torah accomplished something that even Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob didn't have. And their Torah the Torah that they did was not the Torah that we do since Matan Torah. It's a different reality. So therefore, sure, Abraham had spirituality. He was a very spiritual entity. Very spiritual. There's a book that was written by Abraham officially. It's called Sefer Yetzirah. You can buy it. If you'll understand it, it's good luck. Okay, he was a very Kabbalistic man, very spiritual man. that he knew the whole Torah before it was given. You can comprehend that what kind of spiritual man this man was. And so was Isaac, and so was Jacob, and it was Yeshiva Shem ve'ever. In the time of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. There's actually, when I was in Israel one year, I visited the cave of Shem and Aver. They say this is Yeshiva Shem and Aver. And you can imagine, I was in that cave, and now I understand. I only had one student in the cave. It's a very, very small cave. So Abram was the only student in his days. Then Isaac was the only student in his days. And Jacob was the only student because they couldn't fit more than 2 people in this cave. It's smaller than this box. I'm serious. It's a very tiny cave. So because you only had one student. Shem sat and learned with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That was his prize student. Everybody else stood outside the cave. So the Rebbe says in text number 7, the question arises, considering the view in the Medrash and Halacha that God's word conferred ownership of the land to Abraham and to his descendants after him, why can't we say that they conferred sanctity as well? That was the question. In which case, the law pertaining to the land would have gone into effect. So that's the question. So the Rebbe answers it in text number 8a. The difference, and we have mentioned this teaching of the Rebbe many times. So the difference between the mitzvah performed by the forefathers before the Torah was given and the mitzvah performed by the Jewish people after the Torah was given has been discussed many times. In so much as the mitzvah before the Torah was given weren't obligatory, mandated by God. They were unable to transform the physical material of an object used for a mitzvah to confer it onto holiness. It was impossible, right? They did the mitzvah. They did the mitzvah in some kind of a abstract kind of a way. Why? Because they couldn't do the mitzvah in the way we do the mitzvah today. It's impossible. So they did the mitzvah in a spiritual way. Most Jews today like to do mitzvahs also in a spiritual way. Right? They don't like the physical mitzvahs. Let's do everything spiritually. We'll meditate, we'll sing, we'll contemplate. Why do the physical mitzvah? Because that's what the whole Matan Torah came to do. We need to do the spiritual. Then you don't need Matan Torah. Then you don't need to have the giving of the Torah if you're just gonna live in a spiritual world. Truth is, you don't need to come to the world to live in a spiritual world. You came from the spiritual world to begin with. So you came from Gan Eden, which is a spiritual world. So why'd you come for? To live a spiritual life? And then stay there already. That's a waste of time. Matan Torah accomplished that we do need to do a mitzvah in a physical way. We need to figure out, and really God gave us the tools already, to figure out how to do a physical mitzvah. That was the accomplishment in Torah. Not to live in some kind of spiritual dimension. And even do the mitzvah in a spiritual dimension. But how do we do it in a physical dimension? How to do an actual mitzvah. So that's the effect of the mitzvah was only on the person performing it. It was not on the physical object. It was on the mitzvah. The person did a mitzvah. But he didn't actually, Avraham Avinu didn't change the world. He brought God to the world. That was a great change to begin with. But he ultimately, that's why we find that when Abraham died, everybody disappeared. Isaac seemingly started a new organization. It was a new 501c. It was a new organization. A whole new reality, a whole new world. Right? Because really the truth is, the followers of Abraham couldn't handle Isaac. He was a Parshat, a different, even according to Chassidut, he was a Parshat, a different world. They were used to the world, as mentioned last week, the world of kindness, and everything is wonderful. They came to a world of, wait a second, you got to get to work. No one wants to work. Let's give me lunch, and leave me alone. Let's give me food. So they came to a whole different world. Was a contrast to them, and they went away. They went on their own ways, whatever.
That is the way things work throughout the entire Middle East to this day.
Okay.
When Muhammad existed.
Okay, let's not get into politics.
If he did.
Yeah.
when he died. People went all sorts of directions. They left him. That's
Right.
when his.
Well, that's the beauty of mitzvahs that keeps us together. Mitzvahs, the Chassidus, keeps the unity in Jews. A mitzvah, we all do the mitzvahs, we are united as one. The second we leave mitzvahs and we live in the world of philosophy, then everybody has a different philosophy. Ain't they saying Shabbos? There's no two Jews that think the same, right? Notice there's no two people that think the same. So everybody thinks differently. So you're gonna have 500 religions. Everybody needs to do the mitzvah, unites us together as one. We all put on tefillin. We all do that mitzvah together. We all do what we think when we put on tefillin. That's everybody's different. We all keep the mitzvah. So that's the power of a mitzvah, unites us. And that's why keeps the Yiddishkeit alive is the mitzvah, the physical mitzvah. In other words, the formal command when the Torah was given created a notion of a holy object existing in the world. Something can become a channel for a mitzvah to perform with it and through it. When a person performs a mitzvah, holiness is stamped in the physical object, making it a holy object. So right behind me, this Aron Kodesh, this holy ark, became a holy art object. And even in Jewish law, I am not allowed to do anything with this anymore, right? If one day I want to make a different ark, I can't start using this as a bookshelf, even for holy books, right? Because that would diminishing its value, right? If it went for the Torah, even to put a chumash in there would not be justified in Jewish law. I would have to bury this. I would have to either give it to somebody else to use or take it apart and actually bury it, like the Torah that's in it, right? The Torah is in it. If it gets ruined, I have to bury it. And so too, I would have to do the same thing with this wooden cabinet. It's not a wooden cabinet anymore. It's Aron Kodesh. It's changed its name. Avraham Avinu didn't do that. That was done by Matan Torah. Matan Torah accomplished that concept. And so too, this is a shul, right? This became a holy place. Truth is, every Jewish home should become a holy place. Mikdash Ma'at should become a holy place. How do you turn your home into a holy place? Arizal says, if you turn your home into a holy place, then when Mashiach comes, you're going to take the home with you to the land of Israel. Unless you want to upgrade. But why you want to upgrade? You can imagine having, trust me, when the Mashiach comes, you'd be happy to take that. Who knows? You might get a little cupboard someplace. You imagine. So you should make sure to make your home a holy place. Make your home a holy place. So that's what happened at Matan Torah. That's what happened. So now, that's what happened in essence by the Jewish people going into the land of Israel. They made it a holy place. They made it a holy place. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, God said, I'm giving you the land of Israel. The land belongs to you. But it's yours until the Jews are going to come into the land of Israel and then transform it into a holy country, a holy place. And that's why, even till today, they have the laws of Meiser. In Israel, it's all different arguments. It's the Torah obligation, the rabbinical, but ultimately you keep Meisers. That's why it's important. You should know that when you buy Israeli products, that you know that Trumas and Meisers were taken off from it.
What's Meiser?
Tithing. Tithing from the fruits. So you have to be careful. So, Jaffa oranges are beautiful, but you have to make sure that that the Meiser was taken from them because they come from the land of Israel, right? So you have to make sure of those kind of things. You don't have that issue buying oranges from America because they don't have the obligation of Meiser in the Latin America. Never, not in the times of Beis Mikdash, not in the times now. Yeah.
Do they do it automatically?
No. It's not. Nothing is automatic. Nothing is automatic. There's certain fields that do it, certain Jews that do it in Israel, certain that don't do it.
If you go to one of the Yehuda,
Whatever, you have to be
what
careful.
you will find is there are stores that actually say.
No, they have a tudah. Just like you have a tudah kashrut, they have a tudah. If you go to Israel, that will say that this has been taken. Or if you buy Israeli products today, you'll see it on the product sometime. It'll say Truma, it was taken, Truma and Maisa was taken off. Whatever, Maisa was taken off. So it's important, the laws even to today. Why? Because it's a holy world. It's a holy land. It's a holy land. So that's why, going back to his original question and going back to the first Rashi, now we understand the first Rashi. First Rashi in the Torah, Rashi has a question. Why does the Torah start off with Bereshis bara Elokim? Why does the Torah start off with the creation of the world? Right? Creation of the world, either you accept it or you don't, whatever. It's a fact. It's what is important to tell us the creation. The Torah is not a book of stories. The Torah is not a book of history. The Torah is a book of laws. The Torah is a book of God. What is the difference? God created the world, He did it. What's the difference to us? It's a fact. We're going to argue about that forever. You know, how old the world is and when it was created. It's a never-ending argument. A Jew has to follow the Torah, whether the world is 1,000,000 years, billion years, or 578 years, doesn't make a difference. So, you know, God doesn't have to prove himself that he created the world. So why would the Torah even start off with the creation of the world? And Rashi's body, and he brings down. So the same apply when it comes to that Rashi, I'm sorry, when it first start off with the page 79. The same applies to the land of Israel. Though the Jewish people already owned the land before the Torah was given, because God has spoken to that effect, the sanctity could not yet stamp into the physical land. Avram Avinu could not do that. Avram Avinu can have the land. Yitzhak can have the land. Yaakov can have the land. But they themselves couldn't make the land a holy land. To the question why? Because the Torah was not given yet. So it was impossible for God to give them the holiness of the land because they couldn't do it. They couldn't accomplish that. That was not their service. That was not their job. However, after the Torah was given, even before the people that conquered the land, it became possible for the land to become holy. As a result of God's command to conquer it. So the second that God now told the Jewish people to conquer it, not only did the land belong to them, but actually the land belonged to them to make it holy, to elevate the land. And that's why Bnei Slavchad wanted a chelik in the land. They were not interested in having land, because that was easy. Marry, figure out, marry into the family, which is ultimately, the Abishah told them to do that. They wanted to conquer the land. They wanted to do the mitzvah of the land of Israel. They wanted to have a part of the holiness of the land of Israel, not just to have a part of the physical land only. They wanted a part of the holiness of the land, that they'll be able to make this land a holy land, to make this land a spiritual land. So therefore, when the Jewish people took over the land by conquering it, physically conquering it, the holiness of the land was established. And that's why Halacha, the Rambam writes, whatever the Jewish people conquered as a nation, can't be individual sizes that go conquer. The Jewish people as a nation, because they conquered the land to create the holiness of the land, will always be holy, can never be changed.
Well, back to the question that someone asked here before then. So the Euphrates up north, does that mean the land which includes Damascus?
Yeah. Is the holiness of the land. It's still a holy land. Yeah. Yes. It was conquered by Yeshua. Yeah. No Jews there. Yeah.
And if there are, they're invited.
Yeah. So they don't have land. They don't own land. They don't own lands. They don't have an issue. Trust me, there's just Jews there. They don't own land. So now we come to the pasuk. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, text number 9. Shouldn't the Torah have started the verse, this is the month to you, which is the laws of the Torah, which is in the book of Exodus? Why does the Torah start, which is the first commandment to the Jews, were given a commandment? That's what's important. Torah is Matan Torah. So why do we need the whole book of Genesis? And for sure, why do we need the beginning of creation? The truth is we need Genesis. Now you understand why we need Genesis. We need Genesis because God gave Abraham the land. That's number one. We need Genesis because this week's Parsha, God gave Yitzchak the land.
Wait a minute.
And we need,
But don't
wait a second. And wait, so let me just finish my thought. And why do we need that concept? So Rashi says right in the beginning, because the whole reason why we have Bereshis is why? Is one reason. Why does it begin with the beginning of the story of creation? What?
God created it, it's his.
Let's see what the Rashi says. The reason is reflected in the verse. The strength of his work he relates to his people to give them an inheritance of nations. If the nations of the world would say to Israel, you are robbers, for you have conquered by force the land of the 7 nations, you're going to reply, the entire earth belongs to the Holy One, blessed be he. He created and gave it to whoever he deemed proper. When he wished, he gave it to the Canaanites. I'm not arguing with you that God gave the Canaanites the land. Even in the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they lived in the land of Canaan. And when he wished, because God, the whole purpose of the land, which is the truth, is the whole purpose of creation, was that God wanted that the world will be a place that a Jew will be able to elevate the world, will be able to transform the world, and therefore it took 2,448 years for ultimately that to happen. 2,400 something in 48 years, right? Because 2000, I think 2048, Isaac was born in 2048. And 400 years later, the Jewish people went into the land, which is 2,448. So ultimately, the Abishah created the world. In the beginning of creation, Bereshis bara Elokim. Why did he create this world? That in 2,448, the Jewish people will ultimately accomplish to transform and make a world a holy place, which started off when Abraham, that was his agenda, but he couldn't accomplish it in a physical way. Matan Torah, which is 40 years before the Jewish people went into the land of Israel, accomplished that, which really, that's why the Abishter wanted to bring the Jews right away into Israel after giving the Torah. He wanted to bring right away the Jews into Israel. Ultimately, we had another 40 years because of the spies. We had another 40 years, which ultimately brought the Jewish people to the land of Israel, which brought about that even the Jews, interesting, even though the Jewish people did mitzvahs, right? But they didn't do mitzvahs of the land of Israel, the land, and giving trumas and maestras from the land of Israel, by keeping Shemitah. This year's the year of Shemitah, right? Where there's a mitzvah in the land. Instead, it's not just it's a mitzvah in the land to leave alone the land. It's a very hard mitzvah. It's not an easy mitzvah, right? Let the rat walk away from the land.
But you can do hydroponics stuff.
Whatever, just walk away. Trust me, even though the hydroponics, to walk away from your land is not an easy thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do, especially if you're a farmer. That's why Jews became lawyers, because it was a very, very hard mitzvah. Very hard mitzvah. Listen, David said, I'm going to send you into Golos because you're not keeping the mitzvah. So we know it's a hard mitzvah to do. And it's a hard mitzvah to do until today. I just showed you this beautiful WhatsApp, what a beautiful video of the farmers dancing that they're going into this year, Rosh Hashanah, that they all went into a lot of farms in Israel, went into, Baruch Hashem, went into the mitzvah of Shemitah. So they found that the ways of, today they found like mechilas chametz, they do mechilas whatever. But some farmers actually walk away from their land, and that's it. They just walk away from their land. Whatever they do, mechilas chametz, they sell your chametz, they sell your land to a non-Jew over the next year. They figured out the same. They can whatever. I don't know the particulars of the law, so I'm not gonna. I don't want to talk about it. But whatever. But there's a whole argument today. You'll find. Actually, I was in Israel one year on Shemitah. It's very hard to go to Israel on Shemitah this year because And when I was in, maybe I don't know, I haven't been in Israel for a while, but last time I was in Shemitah. I was in the year of Shemitah in Israel, and I see there's a red thing and there's a blue thing, and I went to, so there's two different tudot. One was mechira, that they sold the land to a non-Jew, and one was that it's leisa. So some Jews will not eat in a land that was sold to, so to say, to a non-Jew, to an Arab, and not because it's the Arab, because they don't want to eat that food that was sold to a non, and they'll only eat in a place that is not getting the food, not getting the vegetables from Israel, getting it pushed from a land that is owned by an Arab, really, or coming in imports, whatever, etc. So you have two daughters. It's very complicated. So it was very complicated. You have to go, oh, I can't buy here. I'm not going to eat it here. I'm going to eat here. It's very complicated. So whatever, complicated issue. But why? Because the land. It's not just the land. It affects you. It affects the Israel a whole year this year. The land. You live off the land. Everybody lives off the land. The food of the land, and that's something that mamish, which the Eibishter says, I'm going to give you a bracha if you're going to do a mitzvah in the land of Eretz Yisrael. What could be more powerful than that? But therefore, in essence, what do you tell the world? What do you tell the world? The Eibishter created the world, right? He gives the land. He has a purpose in the land. He doesn't create the world without any purpose. He has a purpose in the world, and he has a purpose especially in this land. That this land is not going to be a land that can be like any other land. This land is going to have certain mitzvahs in this land. This land is going to be able to do certain holy things in this land you cannot do anywhere else in the world. You cannot give tithing. There's no law of Shemitah in America. There's no kind of law. There's this law in this physical land, because this physical land has the capability of becoming holy. And only the Eibishter can say so, right? There cannot be a physical deed. The only physical deed can be the Torah, because that's the word of the Eibishter. If you believe that's the word of God, that is the wish of the Eibishter. That's the greatest deed you can have. So Rabbi Yitzchak said, so if you're going to go, that you conquered the land, just that you conquered the land. So we conquered the land. Right? Other people conquered the land. Or you conquered, you got nothing. So you conquered on, you got nothing. You have the right to conquer somebody else's land. Right? We have the Geneva Accords. We have a Chveisvas. We have. So you say, no, we didn't conquer the land. That's not the reason. That's only one of the reasons. That's not the reason. The reason is because the Eibishter gave us the land. He gave us the land. Why did he give us the land? Because we need to do something with the land. We need to bring holiness to the land, and you cannot do that. Only a Yid can do that, because only a Yid can do this mitzvah.
I don't know if this will sound right. So if you are an atheist, does that mean you leave this whole business? Is that compromise?
I don't know. I'm not an atheist, so I cannot answer that question. But yeah, an atheist. What is saying? An atheist has no answers. A believer has questions, and atheist has no answers. Expression. Right. So if you're an atheist, and this is then you have that's what the Rebbe said, that you're to say the truth to the Torah, because most people believe it. Yeah, most people are believers. So most people, most Americans, and most people in the world are believers in the Bible, and the believers in the Bible. So take the Chumash to the United Nations, take the Chumash to the nations of the world, and say, this is the Chumash, this is what it says. The Eibishter created the world. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, tell them what Rabbi Yitzchak said, and imagine Rashi, who wrote it there. He lived in France. He was a Jew who lived in France, and he starts the whole Chumash with this Rashi. The truth is, the Rebbe says that the Rashi really wants to put down the foundation of the whole Chumash. Rashi is telling you the whole Chumash has one agenda, and the Chumash agenda is, the Torah's agenda is, the Chumash is the Torah. The Torah's agenda is that a Jew needs to change the world. And the Jew has the power to do that because the Abishter gave him the Torah. That's the power that a Jew has. And you need to do that. Whether you like it or not, whether you accept it or not, this is your agenda. And either you're going to accomplish his agenda or not. But the agenda of God will ultimately be accomplished, whether through you or through somebody else. So therefore, the Rebbe writes, text number 10:8, the Rebbe says, conquest of the land of Israel is different from when the Jewish people took the lands of the 7 nations. The land itself changed. Before it has been a land like other lands, which could belong to any nation. Right? The Abishter gave it to the Canaanites, and then gave it to the Vesbas. The Abishter give the land to anybody. It's his land. Because he created it. But from the moment it was conquered by the Jewish people, it was transferred into the land of Israel, the Jewish land, through and through, and from all time, to the extent that it can no longer belong to another nation. They can conquer it, it cannot belong to them. Because as I said before, once this box became holy, you cannot change it. Not a Jew, not a non-Jew, not anybody can change the facts of life. Once a Jew conquered the land and made it holy, it will always be holy. Whether Jews are going to be there, whether Jews are not going to be there, whether Goyim are going to be, doesn't make a difference. It doesn't change reality. The Gentiles who know that once the Jewish people took the land of the 7 nations, it became Eretz Yisrael forever. And this is precisely why they claim you are robbers. And so much as before the Jewish people conquered, it was a land like all others. So you're robbers. So that's their complaint. You're robbers. They're trying to say it's like any other land. And the Jewish people say it's not like any other. That's the answer. Not, oh, we have a strong army. Oh, you can have a land. We can have a... No, this land is not like any other land. All others could have belonged to any nation. The Jewish people don't have the right to take the land of Israel in such a way that will be taken from them forever. This, they claim, is robbery. The answer to this claim is that the entire earth belongs to the Holy One, blessed be He. He created it. He has the right to transform the land's quality from one that is called the land of the nations to one that exceeds the land of Israel. Only God can do such a thing. Only God, that was Matan Torah. Only God, even Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob could not transform the physical world. How holy they were and how great they were, they could not transform the physical world. In essence, it means nobody can transform the physical world. Only God. That's why nobody can come up with his own mitzvah. You want to come up with your own meditation, gesund to hate. You want to come up with your own philosophy, gesund to hate too. But nobody can come up and say, I'm going to do a mitzvah. I'm going to tell you how to invent a mitzvah. I'm going to tell you how to make something holy. You don't know what holiness is. You don't have the balabatishkeit of holiness. You don't have the ownership of holiness. If you understand that holiness is opposite of physicality, then you don't have the ownership of holiness. The only one who has ownership of holiness is the holiness itself, that's God. And God can say, this mitzvah I'm making holy. 365, 245, 48. God is the only one who can say, this land is holy. Who can say this land is holy? Only God can say this land is holy. You might say that's not fair. That's to say you're robbers. It's not fair. Why isn't my land holy? Your land is holy, my land is holy. You have that complaint? Go to God. Go to God. I didn't make it holy. I didn't make this holy. I cannot make Israel holy. I cannot make this box holy. I cannot make a pair of tefillin holy. I cannot do that. God made it holy. God made the land of Israel holy. So if you have any complaints, we're robbers, we cannot be robbers. We didn't rob anything because we cannot do it. We couldn't do it for 400 years. God gave Abraham the land 400 years before the Jewish people made it holy. Because for 400 years, we couldn't transform this concept into holiness. Not Abraham, not Isaac, not Jacob, not the tribes, until Matan Torah, until the giving of Torah, the land of Israel was not holy. So that's the answer. The answer is, yes, we conquered the land, but by conquering the land, we made the land holy. Once we made the land holy, now it's untransferable. Why? Because that's what God said. So go and talk to God. And we can expedite the transfer, but bring it to God quicker. But go and talk to God. That's because the truth. Because you can't ask me a question of what do you mean? Because that's the point. You're stealing something, saying that you made it holy. I don't steal nothing.
How could there ever be a Palestinian state?
That's
exactly the point. There can't. There can't be.
That's the problem.
That's the problem. Because the Rebbe would say, not only a Jew cannot give the land away either. Where does a Jew have the right to give the land away? You think you taking a, I cannot make this a bookshelf.
Well,
You cannot do that. I don't know. Again, don't give me a Shlomo Melech, because I know there's a whole argument that and some hold that he did was wrong. What he did. And the same thing with Avraham Avinu, like you said. Same thing. But Avraham Avinu was less wrong because the Taka wasn't holy. But Shlomo Melech make peace out of the gay certain lands. What? Shlomo Melech from Solomon. I don't know the history. Let's not bring up the history. I know, but I don't want to get into a whole different story. Okay, after the class, he'll tell you the whole story. What? No, you cannot, because again, the concept of bringing holiness into a physical thing is not in my realm. I have no rights to it. I could not come up with it. I will have no rights to that. So I can't capably say that you know what, I'm going to choose something else to be holy. Like Shabbos is a holy day. Oh, I'll do it Sunday. I'm going to do it Sunday. I'll move Shabbos to Sunday. I can't do that because David said Shabbos is the Yom Kodesh. You want to make Sunday holy? It's not going to go and sit on the beach or whatever. Relax. I'm not talking to you, but the concept of kedusha, Zochar Shema Shabbat, Katshay, the day of Shabbos of rest, you do that every day. Shabbos rest. But Lekatshay, to make it holy, only God can make it holy.
Do we have to own the land to do this?
Yeah, sure. That's what they had to conquer the land. Yeah, sure. That's what Abraham owned the land already. Yeah, you have to own the land to make it holy. Yes. That's why the laws, that's why you can't do a mitzvah through stealing. Right? Mitzvah Vav Aveda. If you steal something, you can't make it holy. It has to be yours to make it holy. So first you have to buy it. Now you make it holy. You steal it, it's not holy. Can't make something stolen. Can't do a mitzvah even with a stolen object. Because it has to be a holiness, the first has to be yours. Let's end this off. So the Rebbe ends off on text 11. I think that's the final text. The Rebbe ends off, I have received complaints. Why do I invoke the biblical land of Israel, the Holy Land, and the covenant with Abraham in connection with the modern Israel? Why do I mix God into the picture? After all, they say, those who fought for the creation of the state, those who led it, and those who currently direct it, and its authorized representative, they all proclaim and take pains to emphasize that Israel is a state founded in 1948. My answer, put frankly, is that the narrative is false. No new entity was created in 1948. Rather, that was the year in which a large part of the land of Israel was liberated.
Exactly. Look,
And let's finish off. And the entity established in 1948, based on the agreements or authorizations of nations of the world, has no strength or justification in terms of the authentic response of the claim you are thieves. Because if you're going to go with that, that claim of you are thieves will continue. And it continues till today. You are thieves. So you created 1948. And you took over, you conquered the land, 1967. It's all wonderful. You're Ganovim. How are you going to answer that question? You're Ganovim. You're thieves. You are thieves for having conquered land belong to others. A claim raised by the Arabs, by the Vatican, by the United Nations, and some Jews as well. Right? You're thieves. How do we have a right to thief to gamble somebody else's land? This is why it's crucial to underscore that this is our God-given homeland. If you mix God out of it, then the question that the world has stays. We can have a good answer, they'll have a better answer. We can argue the answer, we can contemplate the answer. We'll fight about the answers to the end of the world. Answer the question the way it should be answered. The answer is, the Eibishter said that a Jew elevated the land. And that is it. Only a Jew can elevate the land. They have elevated the land in time of Yeshua. That's what's happened in the time of Joshua. Now I do not delude myself into imagining, this is the Rebbe's words, that these, he said in Yiddish, that these just and honest arguments will prevail in the United Nations and the Vatican. I'm not, I know, because they don't want to know the truth. Nevertheless, transmitting this truth is crucial for the moral of the Jewish youth living in the Holy Land, including those serving in the IDF, for the Jewish American student, and for the Jewish youth in other countries as well. And said they should know the emes. Not always the emes prevails. That's the problem in a lot of darkness. But the emes needs to say the truth. The second we try to hide the emes, we try to hide the truth from ourselves. Forget about from the goyim, from our own youth that we're trying to give them narratives that they don't understand either. They also say, oh, what's happening? It's not fair. Just say the emes. The emes is the Eibishter created the world. He gave Israel to land. He gave the Jewish people the land of Israel. So they'll bring holiness in the world. Only God can do that. Only God can tell you that a Jewish person will elevate this world, this part of the world, the land of Israel. That they'll be able to do mitzvahs on this place, and no other place. Not in America, not in any place in the world, only in this place. You're not going to build a base of English, only in this place. Because only this place is Kaddish, is a holy place. And that's why you need to emphasize Eretz, it's not Eretz Yisrael, it's not just Eretz Yisrael, it's a holy land, it's Eretz HaKadoshah, it's a holy land. We need to emphasize that to ourselves, to our children. We need to emphasize it's a holy land. What means a holy land? That the Eibishter made it a holy land. What means it's holy? That the land itself is holy. It's not just your land, it's a holy land. Very important thing. And that's what Rabbi Yitzchak told, Yitzchak's answer to the nations of the world. That the nations of the world say that even if it's holy, you're still a Ganef. And the answer is, if it's holy, we cannot be a Ganef. Of course, if it's holy, God is the only one who can say what is holy and what is unholy. Not you, not me, not anybody in the world can say what is holy and what's unholy. And therefore, you're right, the Christians or the nations who are called in a holy land, they should understand that also. If it's holy, that's up to God. Holiness is in the realm of God that was given to man to connect to. But nobody has the rights over holiness. Except the Eibishter, and that's the answer. So talk to the guy even. Abitza says, talk to the nations of the world who say they're holy too. If it's holy, look in the Torah. Torah says that this is a holy land. This is a special land. This is a holy land. And therefore, I'm saying Eretz Yisrael is holy to the Jewish nation. And that's the way it is. As the Rebbe said, I don't want to fool myself to think that the United Nations is going to listen and they're going to accept it, even though they believe in the Torah. But really, I'm saying this for the Jewish people. I'm saying this for the Jewish youth, that they should have the backing to stand up for what is right and what is true. And for the right reason. Don't tell them because you have a strong code, you conquered 1948. 1948 doesn't reveal something that happened in 2048 of creation. That's all what 1948 did. And what's happening since 1948 until today is just revealing that connection of God to the land, where we see miracles happening constantly in the land of Israel. And it's a beautiful country, in a physical way, the spiritual. And today, even the majority of Jews live in Israel. It's all that revelation that's happening in the land of Israel that started off at Matan Torah, giving the Torah, and in the year when the Jewish people conquered the land and came into the land in 2448 of creation of the world. This is all what's happening today, is revealing that greatness of the land. And Halavai, we can continue to reveal that greatness of the land, even though the struggles from the outside and the struggles from the inside, this will always be a struggle, because where there's Kedusha, there's the opposite of Kedusha. Where there's holiness, there's a challenge against holiness. It's always that way. And therefore, it's a great struggle. But sometimes a bigger struggle inside than even outside. Because if we were complete in our resolution inside, we wouldn't have a struggle on the outside. And I connect this with the upcoming class tonight at 7:30, this Anti-Semitism Class, which is an important subject because we all struggle with anti-Semitism. And it's all connected. It's all interconnected, because this is an outside struggle, anti-Semitism, and there's an inside struggle of anti-Semitism. And we need to learn how to through the rebuilding of the inside struggle, we can deal better with the outside struggle of the anti-Semitism. That's going to be the beauty of the class tonight at 7:30. You can come here at 7:30 tonight or on Zoom, and hope to see you there. Have a wonderful and beautiful day. And now, if I get off Facebook, you guys can argue and struggle, and let's go for it, baby. Have a wonderful and beautiful day. God bless you all on Zoom and on Facebook. I wish you all a great day. Hopefully, I'll see you there tonight at 7:30.